Let's go ahead and get started. I know we have a lot to cover today. I am Andrea Claver, project manager for the EdSafe AI Alliance, and I am so thankful to you for being here today for the fourth of our Spotlight webinar series for National AI Literacy Day. Wanted to take a brief moment to thank our partners in this space. These are our steering committee members for National AI Literacy Day, EdSafe AI, AI EDU, The Tech Interactive, and Common Sense Media, as well as a thank you to our corporate sponsors on the screen as well. And without further ado, I am going to pass it on over to our speakers for today, who are leading our session, AI Literacy in Action, the path to the AI Ready Graduates. Team, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon from Virginia, whatever time it is where you all are. My name is Jessica Garner, and I serve as the managing director for ISTE+ASCD. I want to just start by sharing a little bit about who we are as an organization, if you're not familiar with us. We are an international nonprofit that really seeks to work with educators on transforming the learning experience for students. And we have a presence in, what is it, Richard? Probably 85 countries at this point, maybe
Yeah,
a few
somewhere around
more,
that
give or
90-ish
take.
countries. Yeah.
And we are a member-driven organization. We have a publishing arm. We go in schools and districts and do professional learning. We have online courses. We have an amazing conference every summer that many of you have been to. And so we're just really excited to be here to talk a little bit about our profile of an AI-ready graduate.
Awesome. Should we also just quickly introduce ourselves here, and then I'll share some opening thoughts, Jessica. So you said who you were. I'll introduce myself. I'm Richard Culatta. I'm CEO of ISTE+ASCD, and you're going to hear from me for a second. Winston, why don't you tell us who you are, and we'll get to hear from you in a minute too.
Sure thing, Richard. Thanks, and thanks, Jessica, too. I'm Winston Roberts. I am a financial literacy teacher in Trenton, New Jersey, and I'm also one of our ISTE and ASCD Generation AI faculty as well. So traveling around the country, bring all the wonders and joys of AI to all the teachers and district leaders and everything around the country.
Always wearing a suit. You always look underdressed when you're next to Winston, who always looks on brand. It's great to have you with us, Winston. Thank you. So we'll get started here. And I thought what I would do is, as I'm going to, so our plan here is I'm going to share some thoughts, maybe 5-ish minutes or so, maybe 5 to 7 minutes. It'll be pretty brief to help set the stage. And then we're going to just have a conversation. We're going to have a conversation with the three of us and all of you. Please feel free as we have the conversation to chime in on the chat. One of the things that you have to remember, I put this in there, but just the way Zoom is a little quirky, just make sure that when you're typing in chat, you have it shifted to say to everyone, not to panelists and presenters, if you want to be able to have everybody see it. So just a little note there. Okay, let me get started a little bit here, and I want to start, and I'm going to ask this question rhetorically for now, although we'll certainly talk about it more as we get into it. But my question here is, what's the why? What's the why for AI? Why are we doing AI? And inspired somewhat by and here actually I'm going to share my slides here. I'm realizing those aren't being shared. Here we go. Okay, there you go. Hopefully you can all see that. Uh, Inspired by Simon Sinek's book. Many of you have read this great book. He always starts with why. And I feel like a lot of times in the conversations that I'm having in education about AI, the why is really missing, right? Sometimes the why, is like, well, it's here. That's a terribly not compelling why for AI. If that's your why, we got to reset that a little bit. And obviously sometimes I do hear a compelling why, but we need to make sure we're understanding, why are we doing this AI thing? Why does it matter? Why do we care about it? And so I want to just start with that as the focus. And I will share a little bit about my why to offer that as we get going. And others, if you want to share yours in the chat, certainly feel free to do it. But I believe that we need to learn how to use AI in order to be better at doing human skills. There are a lot of uniquely human skills, and we'll talk about what some of those could be in a second here. But I believe that in order to do uniquely human skills better, we actually need AI to help us. And sometimes an analogy that I've used, some of you have heard me probably use this before, is the analogy of the dump truck and the sports car. I think it works as an interesting one here. And if we say, artificial intelligence is the dump truck, and human cognition is the sports car, and we might think about what are some things that human cognition does better, right? What are some things that we should keep as uniquely human skills, as skills that we don't hand off to AI? And there's many of them. Every time I ask this question, I get different answers, and things like discernment, curiosity, creativity, integrity, collaboration, right? There are these skills that we think, and many, many more. And as we think about the opposite of this, so those are some skills that we may say these are sports car skills. These are skills that we want to keep as part of the human in the human domain. There are also skills we need to talk about that humans actually aren't that good at, and maybe never were. We just didn't have another option until artificial intelligence came along. Driving, right? Actually, turns out artificial intelligence is far better at driving than humans are. But maybe some things that are a little closer to the education context, right? Doing things like synthesizing information from a variety of data sets, predicting patterns, being able to make initial drafts of options, right? Coming up with lots of options. AI is far better at coming up with lots of potential options than humans are, because AI doesn't have the burden of our lived experience when it's generating those ideas. It also means that we are much better at choosing the right option because we do have that lived experience and we know what could work and what couldn't. But when it comes to generating options, AI is far better. And so I leave this metaphor here because if we ask the question, which vehicle is better, right? The sports car or the dump truck? The answer is it depends. It depends on what you want to do. And where we have to be really careful is that we don't start trying to use the dump truck for the human cognition things, right? If I want to drive quickly across the country, I'm probably not going to use the dump truck. And likewise, I want to not be hauling rocks in the sports car, right? Not a very good use of the sports car to fill it up with dirt and try to move it around. And so we need to be thinking about when it would be irresponsible to hand an important task off to AI, and when it would be irresponsible not to. I think some of you can probably think of examples of both of these, right? We've seen something, I was watching a case where I was observing in a school, and a teacher was using AI. Students were using AI to answer a test question and then give it to the teacher, who was using AI to give feedback that was then being sent to the students. And so there was this great moment of learning that could have happened if there was this human to human connection, and instead that had been handed off to AI. That's an example of using the dump truck when we should be using the sports car. But the opposite is also true. I was at another school recently where there was a teacher who was spending multiple days working on teaching the students how to format MLA style references at the citations at the end of a paper. Formatting citations in MLA style is a dump truck task that is not a good task to be doing with a sports car. And so that's a case where we had the wrong thing, the wrong vehicle going for the wrong job. And we have to be very careful about that. Last thought that I want to share here before we open it up is where it gets really cool, where it gets really exciting, is right here at this intersection, right? At this intersection where we are using the dump truck and the sports car together. And this is where, getting back to my why, if you remember my why earlier on here, is how do we learn how to use AI to be better at human skills? That's where we have the dump truck supporting the sports cars work. And in order to help think about that, we have created at ISTE+ASCD a framework, a tool, if you will, called The Profile of an AI-Ready Graduate. And this outlines what we believe are 6 key areas, human skills, that we believe all students will need to practice using AI in order to do better before they graduate. So being a learner, somebody who's learning new things, creating learning paths, getting unstuck when they get stuck in learning, getting feedback to help improve their learning, that's a human skill that students will need to know how to use AI to do better by the time they graduate. Being a researcher, same thing. Knowing how to investigate and analyze, that's a human skill, but us that students will need to know how to use AI in order to effectively be researchers. Synthesizing information, right? How to synthesize, remix, refine, relevel. One of the key tasks that all students are going to need to know how to do by the time they graduate is take information and level it down or level it up to be at the level that they need for their learning. Problem solving. I already talked about this. Being a problem solver is a uniquely human skill, but brainstorming options and exploring possibilities, that's something that we need to know how to use AI in order to help do by the time we graduate. Being a connector, using AI to help improve human connection and collaboration. I was visiting a school the other day where the students were expected to do a presentation in front of their class, and their classmates were going to ask them tough questions. So they put the presentation into AI in advance and said, "Hey, AI, pretend you're my classmates. Ask me the type of questions that they might ask so that I can practice answering them in advance. So when I actually get in the moment in front of the classroom, I can have a better interaction with my classmates," right? And then the last one here being a storyteller. And I don't mean this just from an entertainment standpoint. By storyteller, I mean it is a critical human skill to be able to share ideas and concepts that get people bought in to your ideas, that help people change their hearts and minds. Being a storyteller is a uniquely human skill, and it will be required that we know how to use AI to help generate the images, the text, the audio, the other types of media to help us do that uniquely human skill better. These are the skills, and you may think of others, right? These are the skills that will be required for students to be successful in their future, in their jobs of the future. And so that's what I want to maybe leave my opening comments with, is that we have to be very thoughtful about how we're preparing students for this. And so many of the schools that I visit right now are talking about the what of AI. How does AI work? How does an LLM work? What is an LLM? Let's make chatbots, right? These are all very tool focused skills. It's very much about the tool. And it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I am really worried that if we are doing AI in school means learning about a chatbot and how it works and learning about what an LLM is, we are going to miss the skills that students really need in order to thrive in this future world. So there you go. There's my opening ramble. Did that help tee us up, Jessica?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great. So, what I would really love to do is just have a conversation with the two of you about this. And, Richard, just kind of get a little bit of your perspective. And Winston, yours specifically thinking about, being a teacher in the classroom right now in an age of AI and what that looks like. So, I think, Richard, what I would love to just kind of kick it off for you is, one of the things that I hear you kind of saying is, learning about AI by using it, right? And using it to learn. So why do you think that this is especially critical with AI compared to other technologies that have been introduced in schools over the years?
Well, look, I do think this is you could use the same principle with other technologies too. So let's just be clear. I think the challenge here that or the opportunity here is that AI is the first time we've had a tool that can really be a general assistant, right? Assistant to us. This is new to us as humans. We have not had a tool that could be a general assistant to us. Maybe if you were the, CEO of a big company and you had an assistant that could help you, or a researcher and had a research, but that's not, I was a former teacher. I never had that as a teacher. As a student, I certainly never had somebody being my assistant as a student. That just doesn't happen. Now we have this ability to have this assistant, right? But we've never practiced that before. We don't know how to use an assistant for a student, a sixth grader, a ninth grader does not know how to use an assistant. And so that's a new skill set that we have to teach independent of the tool itself. And you could use an assistant for really powerful purposes to help you be a better learner, to help you be a better person, to help you be a more creative person. Or you could use an assistant to simply do the things that you should be doing and therefore rob your own self of the learning. And that's why this is different, because we have to learn what does it mean to use an assistant in a meaningful way. And it's not, you can't teach that in a generic way. This is why I worry about these classes that are like, hey, we'll have a class on how to use AI or with an AI policy, right? How I use my assistant is very different depending on what class I'm in and what my learning goal is, right? If I'm in an art class and I'm using an AI assistant to generate the art, that is robbing me the learning experience, right? If I'm in a class where it's a science class and I'm trying to help demonstrate my knowledge and I need an image generated to help do that, right? That would be a very appropriate way to use AI to help generate media because you're not evaluating me in that place on my artistic ability, right? So really being content specific and learning when and where it's appropriate to ask your assistant to do certain things is a skill that we have to practice.
That's great. And I think that actually like leads really well into the next question, Winston, that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Being in the classroom, can you just share a moment where you had students using AI in a way that really made you think like, okay, this is real learning and it's different than what I've done before. And so would love for you to just kind of share that moment if you've had that moment. I know you've had it as a learner because we've actually had some conversations about you having that as a
Yeah.
learner. But then, if you've had that as a teacher too, like what shifted in your instruction to make that possible? Because I think that's where we are right now as well, is that, people are seeing really good uses of this, but there are a lot of folks who are having a hard time thinking about how their actual day-to-day instructional practice might look different.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think as somebody, I started teaching financial literacy because I was teaching math for a long time, and I just always had this passion to make sure that kids were prepared for the real world. And I think one of the biggest things for me now is like we can't, if all of us as educators say that we want to prepare kids for the real world, we can't do that to fidelity if we don't acknowledge the reality that AI is a part of that world. So even when I started teaching financial literacy, I knew I had to shift my instruction because I could just, okay, we're gonna all do 50, 30, 20 problems and we're all gonna do, calculated compound interest. But the kids are like bored, they're asleep, they're not, engaged in that. So I was thinking, okay, what can I do that will where I can take the experiences that help me internalize these financial literacy concepts and make sure that kids have those same experiences too. So that's how I started designing my curriculum and classes and everything. And then when AI comes along as a part of that, I think I've been fortunate enough to make my class in such a way where it's resistant to kids just using, AI to just get the thing done. I was talking to them today about a project that they have to do. They're like, oh my gosh, we have to do another project. We just finished one yesterday where we had to present to the whole class. I'm like, yes, because the robots aren't doing live presentations yet. So that's what we're going to keep doing. But in the same regard, to answer your question, when it does come up in the previous presentation, I was showing them how to use AI to help generate their slides. So it's like, again, it's back to that dump truck and sports car analogy. I think that if you're, spending hours playing around with clip art on, your Google Slides or your Microsoft PowerPoint, and you're just doing this, like that could be time spent talking to each other, collaborating, and all those different types of things. So I had them as financial consultants, where they each had a role in the financial consulting firm, and they're coming up with a budgeting plan for this fictional high school student. So they could concentrate more on what is the story that we're trying to tell here? What is, who is our client? What are his needs? What are his pain points? And how do we present that effectively for him at the end, rather than us spending all this time trying to create a perfect presentation. I think that was something that I saw that I wanted them to offload off to AI, and also create a high quality presentation that they could embody that role of a financial consultant. I said, I don't want it to look like a high schooler did it, even though you're in high school. I want it to look like it came off of Wall Street. That's how I want it to look. And now you guys can really step in and embody those roles. So yeah, I do have another example, but I'll throw it back to you and everything. For that
Hey,
too.
can I just make a comment? I love that. Right, it's such a great example, Winston, because there are we spend a lot of time in school focusing on the wrong thing, right? And so if you're having this case, you have this class, and you're talking about business concepts or finance concepts or right, whatever it is, any time that I'm spending just tweaking the PowerPoint like you talked about, right? That is wasted time for that purpose of that class. I'm not saying it's not, if I'm teaching a graphic design class, maybe that is what we're going to do, but for your purposes, that is time off task. And so anything that we can do to streamline that, remove that, to give more time for review. I think the same comes up in I talk to English teachers sometimes, right? And I know there's some English teachers that are freaking out about AI. And one of the things that's interesting is you think about, if my purpose is to really help students get their voice right, get their voice right, having AI make an initial draft may actually be a great thing. Do I really care if AI made the first draft? Maybe I do. It depends on what I'm teaching. But if I can offload, correcting grammar, maybe that's the better example. If I'm correcting grammar, if I'm spending lots and lots of time putting the commas in the right place, but what I'm really trying to teach is how to help a student write. Great. Offload all that time of getting those commas right. They're always going to have a tool that's going to help them get the commas right. And now let's open up another two class periods where we can really say, is that the tone of your message? Is that really the idea that you want to get across? It just shifts the time back to the focus of the lesson, which is super exciting.
No,
So you
I
bring
would.
up a couple. Yeah, go ahead, Winston.
No, I was just going off of that. I think especially in English class, you've got I think somebody wrote, I can't remember who it was, but wrote about like the death of the blank page. Now you can like really get into the work. And then there could be some, value of like there's some intrinsic value in like staring at a blank page for hours on end. I haven't found it personally, but hey, maybe somebody will disagree. But one of the ways I like showed sixth grade, I had a sixth grade group of sixth graders using AI. And I was like, okay, well, I don't, usually teach English, but in this creative writing AI segment class thing that we're doing here, like I can use because I can use the literacy components to talk about prompting AI. I had this image of our school logo up on the screen, and I said, describe this in as much detail as you can. And one kid, of course, said three words. It's gray and yellow and blue. And the other kid, like, gave a detailed description of it's a knight and it has a sword and yellow mane coming out the helmet, and just went into so much detail. And I just was able to show these two responses to the kids. What do you notice? And the kid was like, "Oh, I clearly didn't write enough detail." Sixth grade, they're saying this. And then when I took those descriptions and fed them into an AI image generator, they could see the difference because one had this amorphous blob and the other had like a reimagined version of our school logo. So that's a literacy lesson right there and an AI literacy lesson in the same breath, because now kids are like, when Best Teacher Moves is a show call, they're having something to respond to. So I think that's much more valuable than staring at a blank page. But I appreciated what you said there so much, Richard.
Well, and Winston, I think what you said really, and Richard too, it always comes for me, what I love about this conversation is that we're getting back to the conversation of, as a teacher, what is the expected outcome of your lesson? And starting with that rather than starting with an activity that you've done every year, right? And this is good teaching practice, right? I started teaching in the 90s, and this was what was taught to me, when I was a first year teacher is don't start with the activities that you're going to do. Start with what is the outcome that you want for your students. And so when we have these conversations about cognitive offloading and worry about our students' critical thinking skills being diminished, I think that can happen 100%. But we have to be on guard and think about, okay, what is the outcome that I want for this lesson? And then how do I design knowing that AI is here? So start with that outcome. And if you say that the outcome is for students to learn about the writing process, then that's a very different conversation of how we're going to use AI in that moment than if the outcome of your lesson is for you to learn about, the different something about matter and, forces and energy or something like that. Like it's your outcome is going to dictate the way that you use AI. And I think that we really have to keep in mind what is the intended outcome and lean into that, because then we don't see AI as either, friend or foe. I think we see it as, is this another tool that I can use to help me get to the outcomes that I need to? Maybe thinking about it a little bit differently. We disconnect ourselves a little bit from those activities that we've just become really comfortable doing.
Yeah.
So,
So Jessica, so I love that, and I think that's such a good reminder. Like sometimes we just need to remember, like going back to what we know about really good teaching, right? Is really the best secret sauce here that we have. Um, two things, and Jessica, I'd love to pick your brain on something if it's okay. And before I ask that question, I would invite anybody who's listening, if you have thoughts or questions that you would like to discuss, please put those in the chat. Please go ahead and just drop in the chat if there's something that we've said that you would like to dive deeper into, or in particular, if there's something that you are struggling with, right? As you're starting to say, hey, this is a question that I'm hearing, I don't know how to answer it, or here's something that I'd love to be able to think through, more. Please just throw that in the chat, and we'll have as much of a dialogue about those things as possible, because we really want this to be meaningful for you. We want you to be able to walk back into your schools and be able to have what you need. But Jessica, I want to ask you a question. One of the things that we start getting into pretty quickly is assessment, and how do we assess learning? And you've been doing some interesting thinking about this, and how do we, maybe recognize? I think it's perhaps fair to say that AI didn't break assessments; that assessments have been broken for a really long time, but that AI just shined a light on the brokenness of them. But for whatever the reason is, I think we are aware that we need some help in assessments. Share some thoughts on that, how we should be thinking about it. And Winston, obviously, you two jump in as well. Jessica, I just know that you've been talking a bit about this. So talk a little bit about how we should think about assessments in this age of AI.
yeah, so I think there's a couple different angles that you can take about assessments in the age of AI. I think the first one is, what are the types of assessments that we want students to do that are authentic? And it's interesting. Somebody asked me one time, like, how do we know if how do we know what a good use of AI is and a bad use of AI is in education? And I said, well, we've got lots of research that shows what good instructional practice is and what bad instructional practice is, right? From years and years of research. So if AI can be a support in what we already know are those good research-based practices, to me, that's a good use of AI. And so in thinking about assessment, it's a little bit similar to that. As we have known, I mean, performance tasks are something that we've always leaned into and said, anytime that you can make an assessment an authentic experience for students, it's more meaningful for them. I think one of the big problems that we've had in the education world is that performance tasks, project-based learning or problem-based learning, all of these things, first of all, they take a lot of time to do. They take a lot of time to give kids really good feedback on them. The iterative process sometimes for kids can be really challenging. They can get stuck in different parts. There's such a it's a big process to go through sometimes a performance task. And AI really can support that in ways that we've always wanted to be able to do these things with students. And it's just the time giving feedback on all of those. How do I, as one teacher in a room of 30 plus kids, multiple classes during the day, how do I give my kids really good feedback on
Mm.
these authentic tasks that they're doing? And I think that's always been a challenge. Even as you're going through this iterative process with kids, how do I give them good feedback along the way? Multiple times, there's just not enough time in the day to be able to do it. So that's kind of one aspect, right? Is that I think AI unlocks what we've always wanted to be able to do, and we've tried to in the clunky way that we've been able to do that as humans, trying to haul rocks in a sports car. It's not as successful as we want to be. So I think that's sort of one aspect.
So can I just comment on something you said that I think is really
Yeah.
powerful? You just mentioned quickly there that this idea of feedback, and we know that if you want to improve learning outcomes, the main thing that you need to increase is feedback, right? Feedback is the most direct connection to people's ability to improve, and yet feedback is way too scarce in most classrooms, and there's some economics of that, right? If I'm a high school teacher and I have 5 classes times 30 students or whatever it is, like there's just there's a math problem with trying to give direct feedback. AI is actually quite good at giving feedback in many contexts, right? Especially if the prompts are set up right and whatever. And so if we can think about how do we use AI to triple the amount of feedback that each student gets and to prepare them to seek that feedback, right? Wow, what a powerful accelerant that we have to some of the learning. Um, Winston, jump in on that.
Yeah,
What's your thought?
I was just thinking about giving that feedback. I remember like in my early teaching days, how I was trained to, the feedback I was given was I was spending too much time with the individual student. And in a classroom of 30 kids, I had about what, 10 seconds maybe to give to each kid on feedback. And I was like assessed on how many rounds I could make around the classroom and how well I had planned out the three types of feedback I was going to give for that day, and just like going like running around the classroom, getting my steps in on my watch and everything to try and do this. And at the end, I was like, my brain was fried. But connecting what you said about feedback and authentic assessment, I think one of the ways that can be done, leveraging, great instructional practices is leveraging like peer feedback. In every classroom I've taught from fifth grade all the way up to 12th, kids have always cared more about what each other think than what I think. So one of the things that's out in my class is even having kids assess each other. And even if their feedback might be imperfect, having like a strong, rubric, or like having a strong um, you know, endpoint. I think somebody said in the chat about a beginning with the end in mind. If we're like, okay, this is the goal that we're all aiming for, let's give each other feedback around that. And I'm supporting. That's something that can help scale that assessment, because if one group is doing a presentation and everybody in the classroom is giving feedback and those scores count, and then my score counts as well. Now it's like a recursive feedback loop that everybody's getting and holding everybody accountable for. I think I have the benefit of not having a subject that's under the microscope of state testing and everything, so it does help. But as far as scale goes, I do all my grading in the moment because I'm able to just watch what's going on. I make marks, I put it in the grade book, and then it's done. But I'm not having like take it all back with me. But I think there's definitely some applications for AI to play a role in that too.
Yeah. We've got some questions in the chat that I would love to address because there's some really good thoughts in here. So, Richard, I'm going to pass this one to you since, profile of an AI ready graduate is what you led with today.
Yeah.
So this question of my students who are graduating in May, what skills do they need to be successful within this new, trends in AI workforce, things like that?
That's a great question. I see Sheila posted that there, and I think it's a really good one. I go back to some of those opening comments, and I'm actually going to post a link here. I should have posted that before, to this profile of an AI ready graduate, if that's helpful for you, Sheila, or others. I think the biggest thing, if you had, you have students, you have seniors, they're graduating in May. What can they do? I think the most important thing to help them practice is how do they identify areas where they could use help doing their human skills better. One simple one, I talked about this a second ago, but I'll just reiterate this one. Brainstorming. One of the things, I used to work for a company called IDEO. IDEO is the design thinking. They sort of kind of invented the idea of design thinking. They do lots of work trying to get people to think about new and creative problem solving solutions. One of the things that we run into is that humans really, really struggle to brainstorm. It's really hard. And I sit in lots of meetings like this. We're like, hey, let's think of a new way to do this. And they're like, all right, well, we have this option or this option, right? Well, really what you need to do in order to come up with a good solution is not think of two, three options, but like two, 300 options. Many, 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 many options, and then choose the best from there. Well, one is humans struggle to do that, but even if they are good at it and they learn how to brainstorm, it's exhausting. And so, knowing how to use AI to help generate possibilities, help generate potential options. Don't choose for me. Don't make the choice for me. Don't do that, but help broaden my thinking. That's a really helpful one. You can do this with conversations too. If I'm thinking about, idea that I'm presenting, and I want to say, cool, this is my thinking. If somebody was going to give me feedback, if I give me 4 or 5 different viewpoints opposing how I think about this, so I can learn what somebody else might feel about it. That's this idea of use AI to help students get better at doing the things. And I hope that link to the profile of an A-ready graduate helps in some of that thinking.
Yeah, no, that's great. So there's another question here that just asks a little bit about some of the inequities, right? And so thinking about um, existing gaps and inequities that we have in education, and how does AI literacy factor into that? What does that look like? And so happy for either of you to take it. I've also got a few thoughts about this, but you want me to? I
Go
could.
go
I
for it.
Yeah,
Go
go
for
ahead.
it.
Yeah,
yeah.
You
I
you
could go
go
talk
ahead
ahead
and.
and
about
take
it too
Laura
much. You
start
go
first.
for it.
So, I think when we think about students using AI, we immediately think about the gaps between the haves and the have-nots, right? So schools that traditionally have had access to technology and schools that have not had access to technology, we know there's a gap there. I think what's a little bit different about AI and why I feel so passionately that even if you're not a huge proponent of using AI in the classroom or using AI in your life, right? Like we know that there are concerns, there are environmental concerns, there are worries about cognitive offloading and all these different pieces. And so whatever your opinion personally is about I feel like as educators in the classroom, it's our opportunity to open doors for students and to let them have what they need to be able to make decisions for their life. And so, I was a former director of college readiness for a district, and I never viewed my job as, you know, having every single kid go to college. I don't necessarily think that it's right for every single kid, but what I really wanted to have happen was that every kid that graduated had that as an opportunity, that they knew enough about what they needed to do, they understood the pathways, and that they had taken the classes and done the things that they needed, that if they chose that path, it was open to them. And I feel a little bit about AI in the same way. For me, if we ignore AI literacy, the kids that get access to this are going to be able to make informed decisions. And the students that don't have access to this aren't going to be able to make that same informed decision. They're going to be influenced by lots of different people with differing perspectives, from all over the place, from social media, from, pop culture or whatever. And I just believe that educators are positioned to be able to share this with their students in a meaningful and thoughtful way that gives them just this bigger perspective. And so, even if it's not the haves and the have nots, when we look across a single school and you have some teachers that are allowing, their kids to talk about and think about how they use AI and others in the same school that aren't, that creates another inequity. So, that's kind of my thought about this. It's less about your personal opinions about whether you think AI is good to use or not. It is out there in the world. And so my thought is, as educators, it's our responsibility to make sure that our students have the information that they need for themselves to make an informed decision when they graduate.
Jessica, what you just shared just brought a story back for me. How a few years ago I actually interviewed a student at a $70,000 a year private school. Messaged me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, Mr. Roberts, I see some of the things that you're doing with AI. I'm building my own app. I kind of want to get your feedback." There was a 10th grader at this private school who was like being encouraged to use AI to like build certain things. And when I think about that and combine that with seeing Bill Nye the Science Guy speak at ASU GSV a couple years back, and he was talking about how AI is going to be used to like desalinate the world's oceans and deflect incoming asteroids and get like fusion energy and all this stuff. When it comes to equity, I'm thinking about who who gets to share in the equity of the world's problems being solved with AI. Who gets to share that? And if we have, back to what you're saying about, two groups of people in the same school, but if you have two separate zip codes, where in one zip code we're building with AI, we're solving problems, we're researching, connecting, storytelling, we're doing all these things. That's just a part of our daily existence. And another zip code where it's like, nope, don't touch it. It's cheating. Don't do it. It's disrupting the learning process. The existing gaps are just going to widen even further down the road, not just in academics, but I think also monetarily too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's a couple questions in here. I know we have like 5 minutes left. And so, the one that I would love to just hear, in this group is when you're just getting started to think about AI literacy. And I think about AI literacy almost as the foundation for this profile work with students, that before we just turn kids loose on using all these different tools to do these different things, we need to make sure they understand how to be safe when they do that, and again, what some good uses are and what some not helpful uses are for their education. But if teachers are just getting started with AI literacy, and I think this gets to a couple different questions. How do you get started teaching teachers about this without this burden of, gosh, they already have so many different things on their plate. This is one more.
I'll jump in here and then Richard, I'll let you get the last word and everything. I think much like how we've been talking about, project-based learning and authentic assessment, I think having authentic experiences helps people to kind of lower their guard down about what's possible. So any like the first activity I do when I'm usually with a new group of teachers and when they come in with their arms crossed about what AI can't do is I say, okay, we're all going to be songwriters in the next 10 minutes, and you're going to write a Grammy Award winning song in the style of your favorite artist about a personal life experience. And by the end of the first 15 minutes, somebody's in tears because they wrote about the birth of their first child in the style of Beyonce and Taylor Swift combined. And now we get to have a conversation about, okay, how did that happen? How did AI do that? What were the steps that it actually took? How is it working in the background? And how can this be applied not only to your own life, but how does this affect our kids in the future and everything? And then by the end of that conversation, bring it all the way back to what Richard said at the beginning. At the very least, they get to the why of, well, it's here anyway. So I guess I got to deal with it. But I think on the other end of that, you have a lot of people saying, wow, I didn't even think about what's possible now because an hour ago, there's no way I would have been a songwriter. And now I'm just thinking about all the things that are now possible because I've been through this experience. And the more experiences we can give both our kids and our teachers with this technology, I think the more that they'll be able to learn with it. But Richard,
And
y'all get
no,
the last
no,
word.
I just want to build on that. I think that's such a great idea. Like something that, as you were saying, that just hit me was how often we revert to using text when really other media would be better, but we have not been able to because we didn't have the ability to create it, right? So, how many times when I was teaching, that creating a song actually would have been the most catchy way to help teach something, but I couldn't do it because I don't know how to compose music, or how many times an image or a video, right? And so I revert back to text, right? And now I don't have to. I don't have to revert to text because we have all of these other types of media. And I would ask you all to caution yourself on that. Are there times that you're reverting to text because it's what you were able to do, not because text is inherently the best way to teach something? Jessica, can you? I know we have like 2 minutes left here, and I know Andrew's gonna come on in a second to wrap us up. But would you just share? I think some of the work that you're doing with yeah, at ISTE+ASCD to offer some of these training experiences for teachers are really powerful. Will you give like just a 30-second invite if anybody on here wants to participate in any of that, and then we can wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple different ways to reach us. I linked our website in there earlier. So if you're interested and we have an AI page, I can drop that in as Andrea's kind of closing us off. But we do come to schools and districts. We have communities of practice right now that we are getting ready to start recruitment for, where we bring educators together. Winston's one of our facilitators for those. We have all different kinds of engagements, and we really would love to get connected to all of you. So I'll share a couple links in the chat while Andrea's closing us out.
Sounds great. Thank you. And I'll also put a link to ISTE Live, which is our event, our big event that we do in Orlando, where we're going to be talking deeply about this. And so if you are able to join that as well, it'd be a great opportunity to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you all for the rich conversation. Definitely be sure to grab those links from the chat. I always, both as an educator and as I speak to educators, hear all of the amazing words about all the ISTE groups. So definitely take advantage of those. Before you head out, please answer our AI Literacy Day poll that should be popping up on your screen. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how did your knowledge of AI improve after listening to this session? And as you head on out, if you'd like to continue learning today, please visit our AILiteracyDay.org website. We have a few more synchronous events for today, but there's also a wealth of resources from many different organizations to help you build AI literacy on your own, or if you're an educator with your students, there's parent resources, everything you can think of there, and continue to spread the word on social media as well. Thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you, panelists, as well.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.